Hey folks, Brenton Weiberg here with Axis Investment Properties. Today we're going to talk about the difference between taking title as joint tenants or tenants in common. So before we get into this, I want to do a disclaimer. I am not a lawyer and I have no legal training. This is simply what I know and have learned over doing many real estate transactions. Also, before we go into this, if you haven't watched my videos about the different parts of a deed, or the video about types of deeds, you might want to go back and look at those videos so that when you watch this one, it makes a little more sense. All right, with that, let's get started. So here's a typical deed, a fake one that I made for this exercise. And one of the parts of the deed is the grantee description. So it describes who is taking the property or who is getting the property. And in this description, you'll find the first portion is just the name of the person, persons, or entity. It could be a business. After the name, it says what it describes a little bit more. So if, in this case, it's Fred Bunyan and Janice Bunyan, and they're a married couple, so it's describing them. If it was an LLC, it would say it's an LLC. If it was a single person, it would say a single man or single male or something like that. Then after that, it says how they're taking title. It's just a little phrase. Let me reverse for a second. This next little piece that we talk about, it will usually only say this if there's more than one person or entity taking title. If it's just a single person, this doesn't really apply, and you'll see why in a second. Anyways, so after the description of the grantee, you'll see this little phrase. If you blink, you'll miss it. It just says, as joint tenants. So it's a little phrase, but it has some legal ramifications. So it'll either say as joint tenants, in this case, or as tenants in common. Okay, so let's talk about what that means. So let's take joint tenants. Joint tenants means that the two people taking title, or who will now own the property, are taking equal shares, or interests is the legal term, in that property. So it's 50-50 if there's two of them. It's 33-33-33 if there's three of them. It's 25-25-25-25 if there's four, and so on. It must be equal shares. And no one owns a particular part of the property, right? They just each have a share in the property. So it doesn't mean if you were four individuals, doesn't mean that someone gets a quarter of the property. As a whole, everyone has a quarter interest in the property. So they have a quarter right of the property. It doesn't relate to physical aspects of the property. All right, when they become joint tenants, they must do it at the same time and with the same deed. Okay, so you can't add someone later to a joint tenancy. It happens all at once together. Okay, a joint tenancy can be broken if one tenant transfers or sells his or her interest to another person or entity. This changes the joint tenancy to a tenancy in common, which is what we're going to talk about next. So let's recap that for a second. If me and my spouse got divorced and I didn't give her the rest of my property, I could give it to my children. But when I transfer it from me, my 50% interest in the property, to my children, it breaks the joint tenancy and it now becomes a tenancy in common. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, the last portion of a joint tenancy, or the last aspect that is a major thing to understand, is when a tenant dies in a joint tenancy, the interest of the deceased is automatically transferred to the remaining tenants in equal portion. This is called right of survivorship. So this means if I was married and my spouse and I were joint tenants in a property, when she dies, her 50% automatically transfers to me and no one else. And it doesn't have to go through probate for this to happen. There's no other legals, anything that has to happen. It's just when she dies, I now get ownership, or I get her interest. Okay, right? So for survivorship, if we were friends, if there were 4 of us, and we took this property as joint tenants, if one of the 4 friends dies, the quarter portion that friend had gets distributed back to the rest of us in equal proportion. So now instead of each one of us owning a quarter of the property, we now each own a third, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's joint tenancy. The other type is tenants in common, as I talked about. So in this, everyone gets a share or interest in the property, and it can be among different tenants at different times, and the deed, it doesn't have to be on the same deed like it did with joint tenants. Okay, so it can be prescribed at different times, like I said, and there's no right of survivorship here. So this is one of the key reasons people will choose one option over the other, simply because if I'm married and I die, I automatically want my share to go to my wife. I don't want it to have to go through probate or lock up the property or something weird. Okay? Or if we're friends, it's with a group of friends, maybe I don't want my piece to go to my friends automatically. In that case, I would choose to be a tenant in common. Okay, so some examples of when we would use these, like I was just saying, a married couple. So before I go further, you need to check with your state, or wherever you're recording the deed in that state, wherever that piece of property is, I should say. Check with what the law is. If you don't put in that little statement as tenants in common or as joint tenants, and you're a married couple, each state has a different law. Some states, the default for a married couple is joint tenancy, and in other states, it's tenants in common. So if that phrase is missing in your deed, if you're married, you go look at your deed because you want to know what's going to happen to the property if you die. If you don't see the little phrase as joint tenants or tenants in common, but it states you as a married couple, the state is going to make an assumption of what that means. And you need to go check your state laws to know which one they're going to assume. Okay? Otherwise, it should specifically say, and then you know now, because you've watched this, you now know what it means. All right, so we talked about a married couple. We talked about friends buying land together. You might pick one or the other, depending on if you're buying all at the same time, and if you want your share to go to your friends when you die, you might choose tenants, joint tenancy. If you don't want to put everyone into the deal at the same time, or you don't want your property to go to your friends when you die, you would rather have it go to your own kids, then you do tenants in common. It's the same with business. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies a little bit more what the little phrases mean. Like I said, if you blink, you'll miss the phrase, but it has fairly large ramifications legally. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw and learned something new, please like our video and subscribe to the channel.
Also, jump down below and leave us a comment. Let us know how you like this video and what you'd like to see in the future.
And if you know someone else who would enjoy this information, please feel free to share this video.
But most importantly, if you're interested in rural vacant land and want the very best price, go over to accessland.com and check out our current listings or give us a call.
Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. We'll give you some time to do that. Don't forget to leave a comment.
Alright, let's get out of here.